Jimmy Savile was buried at a 45-degree angle, overlooking the same stretch of sea where Dracula's ship, the Demeter, washed up. Both Count Dracula and Sir James Savile were energy vampires who stalked and terrorised England, preying on young virgins. Savile's golden coffin was cast in concrete. Was this to make sure that the vampiric energy beast of the north could never rise again? Was Savile's exposure part of the great cleansing that is currently underway across the world, which Danny Boyle helped to activate with the 2012 London Olympics opening ceremony? As it was during this time the ancient Egyptian Lion's Gate,
an energy transfer portal from the Sirius star system, was opened to help facilitate the recalibration of theoretical spiritual energies that flow throughout the universe.
Here we see the character of the child catcher, terrifying children in their NHS hospital beds. Jimmy Savile has since been accused of abusing dying children in Great Ormond Street Hospital, the same hospital seen in the opening ceremony. We also see Savile in the character of Voldemort, who appeared alongside the child catcher in the Olympic mega ritual. Voldemort, the Dark Wizard, is dressed in the black robes that symbolise Saturn, the pagan Roman god. Let's take a look at Saturn.
Was Jimmy Savile Saturn?
In ancient times, the sun was seen as an invincible god who died and was perpetually reborn. But on the outer edge of our solar system, Saturn was the real king. Known as Kronos, he represented time and law. He was the agricultural god who governed the seasons. He was the Egyptian Set, and he is Old Father Time.
He is Satan, the devil of new religions.
He's the Grim Reaper, Darth Vader, and Pan. Saturn's Day is the last day of the week, the Sabbath, meaning worship of the planet Saturn.
Saturn is symbolised by the colour black and the black cube. It is also the hexagon, which is a two-dimensional representation of a cube in 3 dimensions.
In mythology, Saturn devoured his young, and was also the Grim Reaper, who, scythe in hand, took the sick and dying onto the underworld. The ancients worshipped him with ritual feasts involving all kinds of sexual debauchery.
Saturn was a lot like Jimmy Savile, and the similarities don't end with their hunger for children and guardianship of the dying. Saturn is also known as Lord of the Rings, or in Latin, Dominus Analorum. And what else was Jimmy Savile but the Lord of the Rings? Here is Savile's trademark hexagon ring. The first ritual in Aleister Crowley's Rites of Eleusis is the Rite of Saturn. Crowley believes sexual depravity led to illumination. It was an essential part of the occult rituals he taught worldwide. Was Jimmy Savile some kind of energetic reincarnation or an archetypal personification of the god Saturn? And did certain people knowingly worship him as such? In all his years in the music industry, why do we never see Savile flashing the mano cornuto? Was the mano cornuto introduced into pop music as a tribute to its creator, the horned god Saturn, Lord of the Rings, and devourer of the young? One national newspaper reported that Savile had been involved in satanic rituals in the basement of Stoke Mandeville Hospital. The participants were masked, a requirement during A-star rituals, and chanted Ave Satanas, which means Hail Satan, at the cloaked master of ceremonies, the unmistakable Jimmy Savile. But what if the chant was instead Ave Saturnus, or Hail Saturn? Ritual satanic abuse might be a fiction, it might not. But what would be so unusual about Saturn worshipping cults? The Egyptians, Greeks and Romans had them. Crowley was obviously part of one. Why not Jimmy Savile?
You know what I mean? He was a very special man. You got to go a million, billion miles to find another man like him, you know what I mean? A class amongst himself.
Jimmy Savile compared himself to the great and wise king of the Hebrews, Solomon.
Most people want one wife. I quite fancied having 1,000, like King Solomon.
John Lennon also referred to Savile as King Solomon.
And John comes and sits down and says, "All right, King Solomon, what are we doing wrong?"
Considering Savile's diplomatic mission advising the Knesset in Israel, who else shared this view? Solomon first appears in the Old Testament as the wealthy, wise, and powerful son of King David. He constructed the first temple in Jerusalem around 1000 BC and is traditionally portrayed as an astronomer. In 600 BC, the Greeks made magical amulets and medallions invoking Solomon's name, so they must have believed him to be more than just a stargazer. 400 years later, a text written in Greek entitled Testament of Solomon claims Solomon was given a magical ring by the Archangel Michael that would allow him to control and command the demon race known as the Djinn. The Djinn are a race of half men, half angels, the first of whom, the Jinn, were created 60,000 years before Adam. Amongst their rank are the ghouls, the Merida, and Beelzebub. He used the captive Djinn to build the first temple of Jerusalem and later to kidnap 500 potential wives from all over Europe for the king's famous unquenchable appetite. From the canonical and homogenized biblical account of Solomon, he is a mere astronomer who just happens to have wealth, power, wisdom, and 700 wives. From the unofficial historical records, however, Solomon is a magician who controls demons, who are somehow responsible for his wealth, power, wisdom, and 700 wives. But it's Jimmy Savile's association with the crown that is most intriguing, in every sense of the word. He appeared to have a free pass to Buckingham Palace and maintained a close friendship with 2 generations of the royal family.
Did you know what Duke of Edinburgh's nickname is for me? Oz. Oz? Ostentatious. Oz. I don't know where he gets it from.
Prince Charles once wrote to Jimmy Savile with a gift of cigars, saying,
Nobody will ever know what you have done for this country, Jimmy.
Surely he couldn't have been talking about Savile's charity work. Everyone knew about that anyway. And Jimmy was always known as a fix-it. He would dart here and there, making connections like a sewing machine needle, as he said. His back-story for what he was doing during the war is inconsistent. He perpetuated a myth of his early life. Sometimes he was in the RAF, sometimes down a mine, and sometimes he was laid up in a hospital bed. If he was some kind of spy or fixer, secretly trained during the war, then his backstory would have to be a myth.
All that we can prove is he was knighted 3 times and received an honorary Green Beret, one of only 3 given out, the other 2 recipients being Prince Philip and Prince Charles.
The connection between the occult and the secret services is well known and goes back to the very roots of modern espionage. In 2008, the researcher Richard B. Spence published a book claiming Crowley worked for British intelligence, and his involvement during World War II with naval intelligence officer and creator of James Bond, Ian Fleming, is historically documented. And what of the connection between secret services and royalty? The secret services work for the crown, as they say,
for Queen and country.
The Elizabethan alchemist and white wizard John Dee worked directly for Queen Elizabeth as her personal astrologer and overseas agent. He signed his letters to the Queen, 007. Even further back in time we find Merlin acting as a personal wizard and advisor to King Arthur. Mythology or not, the theme of royalty keeping a court wizard is well documented.
Magic is said to exist in 2 forms, black and white. Traditionally, black is seen as self-serving and destructive, whilst white is restorative and altruistic. The division is only blurred by the intention of a spell or ritual.
Let me see your identification.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
He can go about his business.
You can go about your business.
Move along.
Move along.
An adept magician can flit between the two seamlessly, knowing that the universe is about balance between these two energies.
Maybe Savile and Crowley were followers of a darker form of magic than Dee or Merlin, but it does not mean they didn't perform white or restorative magic too. Savile, it seems, worked tirelessly raising money for charity and fixing it for many children's dreams
And nightmares.
to come true. Savile's charity endurance marathons were multi-purpose. They balanced his karma and raised bags of money for his many causes, which opened up doors to the sort of people his power could really help. Was Jimmy Savile gathering soul energy from the well-wishers and fans who unwittingly convened on the ancient ley lines that crisscross Britain?